Buddy. All right, there we go. Good evening, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello, everybody online. Great to have you. Okay, so far nobody's complaining about audio. You can hear me. That's good. So tonight we've got, people online, let us know how the sound works, because we have two new hanging microphones that Paul Helbig has delightfully installed for us. And I think they're going to work out great, and they should pick up everybody. Yeah. So this is good. Onward and upward. We're continuing Daniel. Well, first, let's see our desserts for tonight. We have dual desserts. We have apple cake and some cookies, and so we are all sugared up tonight and ready to go. All right. Okay, so you go back to live. This is going to be like fellowship time, where it's like starts off innocently enough, and then by like this time next year, it's going to be like a buffet spread.
I see that.
That's what I'm not complaining. I mean,
that's what we're known for.
I know, right? We're going to have just a feast. Like, oh, tonight we have suckling pig. Oh. We wanted a luau theme. All right. So, Daniel, chapter 3. We're in chapter 3. And this is very familiar. We're at the fiery furnace tonight. Everybody knows this story. The fun thing about this is that there are a lot. I mean, the story is very straightforward. Very straightforward. And I mean, you could probably, give me like the 15-second summary, and you'll hit all the points, and we'd be like, yeah, done. But there is a lot of cool stuff kind of going on not behind the text, but like in the translations and some of the wording, some of the way Daniel uses phrasing and whatnot. So there is some cool stuff going on that we'll bring out. But so basically, the general flow here is that Nebuchadnezzar is going to set up a statue, command everybody to worship it. Of course, the three Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refuse, and it becomes a thing. He throws them in a fiery furnace. They survive. It's a work of miracle of God, and yay. All right. So up until this point, and remember, Daniel so far is going chronologically the events. So this happens sometime after chapter 2. So up until now, Daniel and his buddies, so Daniel and the three, have been able to keep the first commandment and the fourth commandment. They have been able to maintain their faithfulness to God by observing his law and not transgressing it to the best of their ability. And they've managed to keep the fourth commandment, honor your father and mother, which is honor your authorities. So they've been able to find accommodation within the government, the society, whatever, to be able to submit to this while keeping this. So the first two chapters are all about that. Here we're going to have now we're going to come down to chapter 3, where it's this or this. Okay? There's no longer any way for them to keep these both. And so when we started this study, I made the point that the good value for us, especially for reading Daniel, is because it does deal heavily in themes of how do you remain faithful in a pagan society. And I mean, we are a very pagan society. Don't have any notions that we're some kind of a Christian nation. I mean, we're very heavily pagan in a lot of ways. The fun thing was I was reading, I don't even know what article it was today. It was something about some actress and saying stuff about it, and it was one of these where my eyes were rolling the whole time. But it was funny because she was trying to make a point that America, our society, is very sexually repressed. Which I know that's an old thing that people have been saying for so long. And I'm thinking, I'm looking out into the world today. I'm thinking, how in God's name could you say that our society is sexually repressed? Okay. And I only bring that up to be the ideas that we have about what we are as a society and what goes on, are skewed from person to person. But by and large, we do exist in a pagan society for the most part. It does have Christian layers over it. It has some layers of it, and it looks in parts Christian, and there are certainly parts that are kind of reminiscent of, and you can point to the faith of the founding fathers and the initial, all the colonists and all that, and it's like, okay, well, we did have some kind of a semblance of a start in that direction. But where we are today, I don't know, well, I mean, I certainly wouldn't call this a Christian culture at all. I feel, maybe 10 years ago, if I said that in a Bible study, I might get some pushback, like, no, of course we are. I mean, within the last year or two, I think we can ditch that one. We're like, yeah, we're not a Christian culture at all. So I think Daniel, even more so than 10, 20 years ago, speaks to us greatly about how we coexist. Well, not coexist. That's a terrible thing because it's a bumper sticker. How we exist, being faithful to God, and trying to do our best to keep these two commandments. But as we're going to see in Daniel, there are going to be times when you can't. It's this one or this one. Guess which one you should probably keep? The first. Yeah. Guess which one we're going to talk about. All right. So there are some. Well, you know what? I'm not going to spoil anything. We'll just go through it. So, first slide. Verse 1. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and its breadth 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered for the dedication of that image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. All right, sounds a little repetitive, but there's a point behind that. All right, first of all, it's an impressive statue. Now, I'm just going to draw this because we have no idea what it was. It could have, Washington Monument.
How big is a cubit?
Okay, so a
90
cubit,
feet tall.
well, here's the fun thing.
90 feet.
Roughly speaking, what it's, if we're going by averages, we're going about 90 feet tall by about 9 feet wide. So it's definitely, it's odd because it's very long, tall, but very, funny thing about cubits is there was no, a cubit wasn't necessarily a cubit. You could ask anybody what a cubit was, and it was different because a cubit was generally the length of, from your fingers to, I think, your elbow. Well, I mean, it depends on your arm, right? So it could be shorter, it could be longer. People were shorter back then, so shorter. Although, since this is King Nebuchadnezzar's image statue, and because the king is always impressive, maybe he was a bigger guy. Maybe, you always want, our king's got long arms. Who knows? So maybe it would have been a little bit longer, but in general, it's about that. So it could have been a figure. Was it Nebuchadnezzar? Well, maybe squished. It could have been anything. We don't know what it was. There is, when we get into it, it'll talk about how the purpose was to worship the gods of Nebuchadnezzar. So maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was a representation of his favorite god. There were a bunch of them. We don't know where it was placed. So freestanding would have been kind of like this weird Washington Monument thing, right in the middle of nowhere in a big obelisk sort of deal. It could have been, there's some thought that maybe it was kind of situated in a corner of where it was, so it was kind of where you could only see it from a shadow, so maybe it was, I don't know, it was big. Last time I did this, we got into a 15, 20-minute conversation about, well, are we sure that was the size? And debating it, and I'm like, I think we're missing the point. Big. It's a big statue. It's a big statue. There we go. Big, but it's not unique. There were bigger monuments in the ancient world. I think the Sphinx in Egypt was bigger. So, I mean, it's big, but not like Tower of Babel, impressive big. Okay? It's just big. So there's going to be a lot of before we get to the fiery furnace part, there's going to be a lot of these subtle, well, not so subtle, repetitions, and just Daniel is inserting these details and repeating things to underscore some things. So the size of it is very impressive and very big. The implication being is you cannot avoid this. Like, Nebuchadnezzar has set this thing up to be worshipped. He didn't set up a little thing where you're like, oh, I don't see it. Everyone can see it. You know, he's gathered all the provinces of Babylon, right? He's gathered all these officials, the high people from the provinces, wants them all to come together to see this glorious thing. So the point was, you cannot miss it. This is how big it is. So you cannot miss this object of idolatrous worship, okay? The officials, he repeats every single group of officials, right? And he orders them from most important to least important. Okay, no big deal there. But there's also kind of in the repetition of these are the people gathered. These are the people gathered. Everybody's coming to worship it. From the most important to the least important. All the people cannot get away from worshiping this idol. Okay? So right there, the way he lists out all the people, the way he repeats it, it is all pointing to there is a pagan form of worship, and it is unavoidable. Everyone's doing it. All right. And also even that Nebuchadnezzar, it says, he calls the people, and then Daniel repeats it almost, word for word and says, and these people he called, and these people came. So it's like Nebuchadnezzar says it, and it's done. So he's drawing this picture of, all right, this is how it's going to be in pagan land. The king says, do this, and it's done. You don't have a choice. Nobody, and none of them, they all came and they stood before it. Nobody had a peep. They're like, oh, all right, what we're doing.
What is a satrap?
A satrap is, I don't know. It is some level of official in the governing kind of. Now I think satrap was actually kind of a specific to that region. It's either that was specific to that region or it was more of a Persian loan word that we can get into later. But it was some high-ranking official. I don't know exactly what the responsibilities of what they did, or county clerk, that if they were like that, or if they were more like a governor. Although he said governor. Anyway, so that's what we got going on so far. Everybody good? All right, next slide. And the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. Therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up." Oh, Heather for the win. Oh, my mom too. Hey. The McCoys McCoys and Sauces are on point tonight. So, a satrap is a provincial governor in the ancient Persian Empire, a Persian provincial governor. So why I said that, we could talk about that later, is it's interesting because they're not Persian. They're Babylonians. The Persians come in later to conquer Babylon. Now, some people look at that and say, ooh, see, problem. Daniel's using Persian words, and they didn't have satraps in Babylon. Okay, well, they did, under a different name. What happens is, who releases Daniel back to Judah, or releases the people? The Persians. Persians, their language starts to, their words infiltrate, whatever. So when Daniel is writing this down after the fact, it's likely that he's using now these Persian words to refer back to those officials. So provincial governor or provincial, governor. There we go. So yeah, not a problem. Not a problem. All right. So back to what we just read. Again, we get this repetition. "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages." And then, is that repeated, or is it just that? Okay, well, anyway. So first, provincial governors, so you're talking about local kind of stuff. But now, O peoples, nations, and languages. Everybody, all right? So now it's not just that, but it's peoples, nations, languages. All right. If you thought you can escape the pagan influence and being forced to operate in the pagan world by getting out of Babylon, no. Everybody. Now, granted, not everybody in the world is going to hear this, and obviously they're not going to come and do it, but the implication is this is all-encompassing. It is unavoidable. In fact, what Daniel is doing here is pagan worship is unavoidable. This is what he's developing here. So it goes out into the whole world. Universal acceptance. So all the world is accepting pagan worship. Lists all the instruments. I love that bagpipes get in there. It's like, woo, Celtic influence. Whatever. But you have all these instruments listed out once, listed out again. So there's this unmistakable call to worship. And he says, when you hear the sound of any of these instruments, so you can't get away from it. Everyone's going to hear these sounds and be called to worship. Okay, so you can't claim, oh, well, I didn't see it, so I didn't worship it. Because again, they don't want to worship, right? So they can't say they didn't see it. Everyone can see it. They can't say, well, we didn't hear the call, or nobody else was. Everybody was. They couldn't say we didn't hear the call to worship. Everyone's hearing it. Okay, unavoidable. There's punishment involved. All right, whoever does not fall down in worship immediately cast into a burning fiery furnace. So there's punishment, yes. Immediate punishment. There's no mercy. There's no second chances. You fail to do it, boom, you're toast. Literally. So yeah, unavoidable, immediate consequence. You cannot escape pagan worship. You cannot escape breaking the command, okay? And the repetition is, again, so hear all you peoples, nations, languages. When you hear all these different instruments fall down in worship, then it says, okay, as soon as the peoples of every nation and language heard every one of these instruments, what do? They fell down and worshiped. It is inevitable. Everyone is going to place themselves before this golden image and worship. Okay? The picture that Daniel, see, it's more than just information. He's not just like, oh, this is what happened. He's trying to show that, look, we're not just talking history here. This is a lesson. This is a historical lesson. You're going to face it, and it's going to be bad. Okay? You're going to have to make a call here. Okay? Questions about that part? I love this stuff. This is great. Whoever picked Daniel, good job. All right, next slide. All right, therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans, those wicked Chaldeans, came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. They are such suck-ups. O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Ooh, don't we hate those guys? All right, Chaldeans. First appeared in chapter 2, where they were part of the group called to interpret his dream. Yeah?
You know where they're at now? Most of them live in California and Michigan. I've done some study.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
Chaldeans.
okay, Babylon, if you're talking about Iraq, Iran, so that region where the people, where the Chaldeans were from. I wouldn't necessarily say, well, I don't know if they consider themselves Chaldeans.
They do.
I mean, Iranians, I'm pretty sure, consider themselves Persians, I think. Well, anyway, but, okay.
Yeah, I
Fair
studied
enough.
up on it.
Fair enough. I'm like,
I was-
California
I was
didn't exist
shocked,
back
too.
then? Like, where are we going with this?
Well, they probably live down by Detroit.
Yes.
Yes.
There's a wonderful Chaldean restaurant.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the food, yeah, I've heard.
Absolutely wonderful.
We haven't
I couldn't believe it.
taken part yet, but I've heard good things.
I have a question about this part.
Yes.
They mention the three, they don't mention Daniel.
We're bringing that up, yes.
He's right there in the palace.
It's always you where I've got, my third point on this section is, why is Daniel omitted? You are on top of it. We'll get to that. Very good.
Okay, I'll shut up.
No, that's good. Because God knows I go off topic a lot, and I sometimes, we need to skip. We will cover that, yes. There's a question online, does the decree only apply to those close to the image? Well, I mean, it goes out, okay, so he's brought out all the officials of all the provinces. So, and actually to skip ahead, why Daniel is omitted. Why isn't Daniel a part of this? Well, because, if you look at just the function of it, he's called out the officials of the provinces, so kind of wider Babylon. And it says, okay, all you provincial overseers, governors, whatever, come here and see this statue that I planted in this place, okay? And worship it and bow down. So it is partially to show Nebuchadnezzar's greatness, partially to keep people, you want them submitting, and so the best way to know who's going to submit or not is say, hey, do this thing. And you're going to see who doesn't do it and who does. So it's going out to the provinces. It doesn't specifically state that Daniel is a part of it because he's back at the royal courts. Because in chapter 1, I think it's chapter 1, we see that Daniel served in the courts while the three went out to the provinces. So there seems to be kind of a difference here where it's like, this is for the province stuff and maybe not the court. We don't have exactly a word that says this is why Daniel wasn't a part of it, but based on what we have in the text, that's most likely the case. It's just that this was for all that and not this. So it wasn't necessarily like...
Could it be because he was a dream keeper, interpreter, wasn't he? Maybe he was his right-hand man, I don't know.
I don't have a solid answer other than the most likely, because there have been people who point this out and raise criticisms about it, like, well, Daniel, blah, blah, blah. And the thing is, if Daniel was there, it would have been smarter to put it, write him into it. Or if Daniel wasn't there, why didn't they write him in later, after the fact, be like, oh, he's a hero too. Let's raise Daniel's stock here. So for whatever reason, it's likely that this is just the way it was. So there was some sort of it's for you guys, not for us. So maybe there might have been some feelings of unrest. I doubt it. I have nothing to base that on. This is just conjecture. But, whatever the case is, he's doing this to kind of play up his stock or whatever.
It was an outreach event.
Outreach, yeah, there you go. It was, Marduk outreach, yes. Comment online, so it's just the important people affected, not to the general public. Well, this is kind of whether it's, everybody is supposed to, I guess. Sorry, I'm like, you're asking. But right now he's calling the provincial governors to kind of, this is the unveiling event. This is the grand opening, the ribbon cutting. So this will kind of continue on. So I would assume it is meant for all the people. But it's, he's gathered, this is the sneak preview kind of moment. So that's what's going on there. So the Chaldeans showed up in chapter 2, and they're the ones who said, he said, interpret this dream, and they're like, oh, no, you tell us what the dream was, and we'll tell you what it means. He's like, no, you're blowing smoke. I know how this goes. And they're like, oh, king live forever. Nobody can do this. It's impossible for you to do it. And then who does it? Daniel. He proves them wrong. The Chaldeans said it's impossible to do it. No one can do it. Here comes Daniel, and he does it. And he does it, and not only does he do it, but he's elevated, and his three friends are elevated too. So it's likely, notice they maliciously accuse the Jews. They're not like, hey, Nebuchadnezzar, we're concerned about your authority here being besmirched. They have an axe to grind. They're probably jealous. They're probably PO'd. They're like, those Judeans showed us up. They got really nice assignments. They might have been like, hey, we should be there. We should be head of the provinces. Whatever. It's likely that they were ashamed of what happened. So now they're like, oh, okay. And, it's like, whether they saw them not worshiping or they knew, whatever, they bring it up. So they maliciously accuse the Jews. And they kiss so much butt. Oh, king, live forever. Oh, you've made a decree. And they repeat it word for word. We were listening. We were paying attention. We got it right. we were paying attention, we got everything, and we know, and we did all this stuff, and you said that you'd punish them, and they didn't do it. So, these are the worst. These are the kids in the class who are like, hey, teacher, didn't you say we were going to have a quiz today? And everyone's like, oh, you. This is them. They're like, really? Did you honestly? Okay. They're those kinds of people. So there's a threefold kind of portion to this accusation. First, it's they don't heed the king's authority. They're disobeying you, king. Okay? So they're saying, based on civil authority, they're breaking it. They don't serve the king's gods, number 2. Okay, now we're talking about religious stuff. And they don't bow down at the statue. So religious stuff. So it's the king, they're disobeying you, they don't worship your gods, and they're not worshiping. Like they don't believe your gods, and they don't worship them. All right. The grammar in the text actually illustrates how this is an affront to the king. And you don't get it in the English translation, but in the Hebrew, or Aramaic if you will, front loads the Nebuchadnezzar stuff. So instead of saying, what do we have here? They pay no attention. Okay, they do not serve your gods, yada, yada, yada. Actually says, your gods they don't serve. Okay? The statue you set up, they don't worship. So they've kind of front-loaded the accusation to really, it's their way of underlining, like, what you have said, what you have demanded, they're not doing. So they're really trying to show how they are going against Nebuchadnezzar. So it's bad enough they're not doing it, but it's really an affront to him. So Daniel being omitted, we covered that. Good call, Paul. The mics are working great. How long did it take us to figure this one out? That's okay. We're getting there. Awesome. Cool. Next slide. We'll continue on. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? Oh, if you only knew. All right, side note, they keep on being referenced by their Babylonian names, okay? Because they have their Hebrew names and their Babylonian names. So even here, they keep on being referenced by their Babylonian names to further this unavoidable thing by referencing, saying like, hey, you guys, you have Babylonian names. You cannot get away from it. It was always going to be where you were going to have to bow down. You were going to have to worship their gods. You could not get away from it. You are Babylonians now. All right, so the king is furious. Guy has a quick temper. Part of his prestige, his power, his authority is when you say something, people do it. So this is a bad look. So they're challenging him. Now, he does give him a chance. He says, hey, you bow down and do it when you hear the sound? Cool. We're good. We have no problem. But if not, into the fiery furnace. This is not necessarily mercy. Not necessarily saying, oh, yeah, that Nebuchadnezzar, you can always work with the guy. More than likely, especially since the Chaldeans who are raising a stink about it, it seems likely that it's more like, you know what? The king appointed those guys. It's a bad look to Nebuchadnezzar that he appointed guys who are blatantly disobedient. Okay? So this actually reflects poorly on him. That like, oh, you raised up these guys. They won't listen to you. So by giving them a chance, this is kind of damage control for him too. Where it's like, oh, surely it's a mistake. Surely you must have heard wrong. Let me explain it to you. Here's what's going to happen. All right? So this is just him kind of, all right. Let's set things right here. Notice that the accusation brought up, they challenge you, and then 2 accusations of challenging your worship. He doesn't bring up the challenge to him. All right? He doesn't say, oh, you disobeyed me. All right? He brings up oh, you don't worship my gods. You won't bow down. He's only concerned theologically. Okay, here's kind of the place where it's going to turn a little bit. It's like he's challenging him. He's making it about religious authority. Because he's the king. He's like, of course it's not against me. I step on you. You know, I'm not going to say kick the cat again. Oh my God, I got text from my mom about that one.
It's kind of surprising because not that long ago, he was praising their God because
Well,
of the dream.
right. Well, so it goes, right? Well, I mean, it's in a way you could look at that and say, well, it's one thing for their God to interpret a dream, but that doesn't necessarily put their God as an authority. Like, so, because again, they're thinking multiple gods with like, so their top god is Marduk, whatever. So he's kind of the top, and there's all sorts of other ones. So as far as Nebuchadnezzar is concerned, when he praised Yahweh, Yahweh is somewhere down here. Like he acknowledges, like, well, okay, your God's there. He told you the dream. It was divine. But, I mean, he's one of these lesser gods. He's not Marduk. He's not my God. Okay? So he's making this, it's a theological challenge. He's challenging about their faith and their worship. All right? So it's no longer about civil authority. It is about religious authority. Okay? And it really heightens, and you can see it by his final question. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? You know, this is a theological dilemma that he's raised. Okay, this is all about faith. He is not, I mean, he's not really asking, like, who is this God who will deliver you? He doesn't think there is one. He knows Yahweh is a God because he interpreted dreams, but he doesn't, Yahweh has got to be inferior to his gods. So if Yahweh could do some stuff, but Marduk is his man, and there's no way, and if Marduk backs Nebuchadnezzar, nobody's going to save you. So basically, I mean, this is a taunt. There is no God. Tell me who the God is who can save you from me. I am God. I mean, that's how elevated he kind of was. You know, I am the one. So yeah, he's taunting them for their faith. All right. Questions? Comments? Cool. Okay, this is fun stuff. All right.
Would these
Building
guys
up.
be considered today sane or insane?
Who? Oh,
His bunch.
They would be- Nebuchadnezzar?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean,
You
as
put
much
up
as you can
something
tell
like
anybody
that?
watch TV, who's insane and who's sane? I don't know. It's hard to tell anymore. I mean, I wouldn't say he's necessarily at this point insane. I mean, he's a product of his time and context. I mean, he's faithful to his gods. You could say that. Is he insane? Probably not. No more insane than anybody else.
Do we consider Mount Rushmore, if you go out there and look at those presidents, that's kind of the same thing as worship? That's not worship, because that's a landmark, right?
Right. Well, yeah, no, this is a whole different level. I mean, this is worshiping. This is not like acknowledge and like, oh, wow, and remember fondly, whatever. No. This is worship. This is what he's getting at. It's not a question of anything in the civil realm whatsoever. This is all about religion and faith at this
He's a
point.
God, not a hero.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Cool. All right. Next slide. Oh, this is fun. All right. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, I love it. Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Go, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Love that we have no need to answer you. Now, this isn't necessarily like but it's just like, what more do you need? You saw what we did. Do we need to explain it? Like, do we need to write it out for you? We're not going to worship. I mean, he's like, explain it, and we're like, we don't need to. Our act of defiance is explanation enough. You know, it's not necessarily like stick it to the man kind of thing, but they're just like, what do you want us to say? Yeah, it's like, you know, we had, it's like, okay.
Hard to know, don't you understand?
And they're indicating in saying this, they're indicating, we're not going to make excuses. We're not going to try to weasel out of it. We're not going to say, we didn't see it, we didn't hear it, we didn't know. Like, yeah, oh no, we heard, we saw, we heard, we know. We're not. It's like, they're just not, and they say, look, we're not going to worship your idol. Plain and simple. Now the part here where they say, if this be so, our God whom we serve, this is a little weird. And the translation in English does get a little weird here because the more straightforward literal translation makes some people uneasy. Because what they more literally say is, if our God whom we serve exists, he is able to save us. And certain theologians, scholars, whatever, they read that and we say, they're saying, if our God exists, he can save us. So they say, that must mean that they're not sure that he exists, which is a stupid thing to think, because they're basing their opposition on the fact that they worship their God. In fact, they're not making excuses. They're saying, look, here I stand, I shall do no other, right? They're doing they're the, at least,
They're
first,
putting
second, or
their
third
lives on the
Lutherans.
line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're saying, look, no. So, of course they know he exists, okay? But Nebuchadnezzar, he knows Yahweh is a God, but he definitely doesn't think Yahweh is the God. So they're kind of playing into this sort of hazy Babylonian gods, whatever. And like, look, hey, if our God, whom we serve, exists, because you're not really sure, or maybe you think he does, maybe you're confused on the concept, but you know what? If he exists, he'll save us. We're not afraid of you. That's all they're saying. They're not doubting God. They clearly believe he exists. Nebuchadnezzar is the one questioning their God's ability. Because he says, what God is there to save you? There is none. So really, they have a God. See, Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges that they have a God, but then now he's saying, what God is there who can save you? So either he challenges his existence, or it definitely challenges his ability. Nebuchadnezzar is the one who has the issue. So they're saying, look, okay, you don't think there's a God who will save us? If our God exists, he'll save us. They got some spunk to them. I like them.
They said if not, so be it, or something, so
Well,
what?
yeah, basically, so the whole thing, the actual translation gets a little, in English, they sort of render it in a format that sounds kind of what they were saying, but the thrust of it is basically what they're saying is, so, look, if the God who we trust exists, he'll deliver us. He'll deliver us out of your hand. But you know what? If not, be it known to you, then that we will not serve our gods. Well, let our God save us. We're still not going to worship your gods. And really what it comes down to is what they're saying is, let our God save us. Let our God deliver us. They're kind of making a point of, look, because you're saying he won't, and we're saying he might not.
Aren't they being true to God?
Yes, they are. They're saying, look, we trust in our God. So we're going to say, we still won't worship because we're going to keep this commandment. And he's saying, like, look, if our God saves us, he saves us. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Changes nothing about who he is. In fact, they're saying, even if our God doesn't save us, we're still going to trust him.
Don't care.
We're still not going to bow down and worship. Because that's kind of the thing where people will always, like, if they're trying to really crush your faith, they'd be like, well, do this, and you have all this wonderful stuff. You have freedom, you have whatever. And we'd say, like, well, all I have to do to get that is reject my God? All right, have fun. So yeah, they're making their stand. Awesome stuff. Either way, they're not going to worship.
It's interesting, all three of them together replied in unison, like they all knew ahead of time.
Yeah.
Like they all went to the same church and they were like sworn that, okay, this is what we believe, we teach, confess, whatever, this is what we're sticking to.
They were this.
Well,
They were their own little synod. Because what synod means is walking together. Yeah, they were walking together. There was no, And it showed, like, it wasn't like in chapter, what was it, 1, where Daniel kind of came and conversed with them and like, hey, here's what's going on, let's talk. There's none of that. Daniel doesn't give, did they converse? I don't know. Daniel doesn't tell us they did. But so the image that he gives us is they were locked in. There was not a doubt in their mind, and they were all, from the get-go, bam, this is what's going to happen, and this is what's not going to happen. So yeah, they were solid.
Those people didn't cuss back then days, did they?
Cuss? Oh, they had their own,
I've
sure.
never heard- I've
Oh,
never heard-
absolutely. Oh, well, hold on. Hold that thought. Comment online, they're not questioning their own belief in Yahweh, they're questioning Nebuchadnezzar's belief in Yahweh. Yes, absolutely yes. Did they, sure, every society, every time has curse words.
Not like ours.
No, well, theirs were
I
probably
mean, you
more,
got little kids coming up.
they were more
Oh, yeah.
creative. Paul talks about poop a lot.
Oh, wow, a poopy?
Yeah. He
that's
discussed, there are fecal comments that Paul drops every so often. Elijah is awesome when he's with Elijah and the prophets of Baal when he's on the mountain and he's taunting all the prophets of Baal because they're like, oh, come on. And he's like, what's wrong? Is he asleep? Oh, maybe he's on the crapper. Maybe that. I mean, he literally says, oh, maybe he's relieving himself, which is great because the image is like, oh, maybe your God had to take a moment out back. So, I mean, oh, yeah. And honestly, they were more creative than we. I mean, we're pretty uncreative with our swearing.
I don't
It's just,
know.
I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
Things I've heard.
we swear and it's just out there. They were creative about it.
So I want to tell somebody, oh, he's on the poopy.
Yeah. There's lots of fun
I don't
stuff.
know, I just never noticed.
Scripture is awesome. Anybody who says scripture is boring, they haven't read it. It's good stuff.
Carol's mad because I said,
All right. Okay, we're caught up online. Good. All right, next slide. Oh, we have too much fun. You know, this is why we can't have wine and cheese. And be like, whoa, all right. All right, verse 19. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. All right. So the expression, oh, this is fun.
without cussing or swearing.
So the expression of his face was changed. So, you know, he's just like, okay. But the translation, actually, it's not his expression, the image of his face changed. Where there's this nice little correlation here. Oh, I erased it. Because this is referred to as the image that he set up, right? So Daniel, in his fun little way, because he could have said his face changed. There are words for that. Expression, face, whatever. But he uses image, kind of tying these two together as a subtle thing, saying like, okay, so Nebuchadnezzar, his face changes. He can change. This doesn't change. This can do nothing. Like, so Nebuchadnezzar is like, oh, worship this because this is almighty. Worship my God. It's like, this, he changes. This can't change. This can't do anything. So there's this nice little subtle thing where he's like, oh, you're back in nothing. What you've got can't do anything.
Oh,
What's that?
Nebuchadnezzar went from furious to shock.
Yeah. Well, he's going to feel a lot of emotions. He's going to go over the whole spectrum by the time we're done. So yeah, it fully changed, and so you know, their God can't even change his image.
those who make graven images will become like them, their idols.
Well, yeah,
He became like this.
yeah. That too. Yeah. So good, very subtle stuff that Daniel's writing here. Heated 7 times hotter. Don't be literal. They had no way to gauge this. It's not like they had a temperature gauge. I mean, 7 times hotter is just, okay, so 7 is a nice biblical number, meaning to the utmost, the completed, God finished this creation in 7 days, the fullness of creation, 7 days. So all this means is he heated it up to the most it could be heated up. So, usually they throw, 5 logs in there, so he threw in 80, whatever. It's as hot as it could possibly be. 7 times. All right. Now, if they find an ancient thermometer, okay, I'll change my tune, but whatever. And there's an urgency to it. They're bound with all their clothes. Usually you kind of strip people down and toss them, but it's like, nope, immediate. He said immediately, and he means immediately. He's so angry. He's like, get them in there now. So they're bound up with everything, and they're tossed in. And it's so urgent, in fact, and so manic is he to get this done that they're bound and tossed in. And when they open this thing up, evidently the heat is so massive that it incinerates the other guys. So they're tossed in, and the other guys are like, they burn. So, his wrath, his fiery wrath is consuming everybody. So, Nebuchadnezzar. All right. Then something happens. Next slide. All right, then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." He answered and said, "But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace. He declared, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. All right. So there's a fun, really abrupt transition. And we don't get, it goes from like, all right, toss him in. And then, what? He's confused. We don't get any narrative of what's going on in there, and then suddenly, it's just all of a sudden we go from he's angry to now he's confused. And then he's like, Most High God, your God, okay. So a lot's going on. He's going roller coaster of emotions. So rather than detail what's going on, Daniel just uses Nebuchadnezzar's point of view to explain what's going on, what the miracle has happened. So he says, there's 4 parts to it. Didn't we throw these men into the fire bound? Okay, they're no longer bound. All right, the bonds fell off, they burned up, whatever. It's miraculous because they come out fully clothed. Because, if the miracle was, their flesh was spared, but their clothes burned off, like their bonds burned off, well, this is part of the miracle. It's like, well, these burned off, but nothing else did. So miracle. I see 4 men unbound walking. All right. They were miraculously preserved. They're walking around. They're not twitching on the floor or toast. They're walking around, okay? Miracle. Other miracle is there's another one. There's another guy in there walking with them. And this one has appearance like a son of the gods, okay? So not only, obviously, miraculous, but even the appearance of that one is he's divine somehow, okay? Now, he's not like, I think some translations say, one like the Son of Man. That's creative. Nebuchadnezzar wasn't there, okay? He wasn't like, Son of Man. It's more that he says, like a son of the gods, indicating that he identifies this person as divine, somehow related to the gods, but he's just like one similar. So he's still thinking all these other gods, right? And then they leave the furnace unscathed, obviously a miracle. If the heat that generated when you opened the door burned these other guys up, they were in it and they came out. So obviously miraculous. So the identity then of the 4th man, who could it be? Jesus, there we go. Some people would say, well, it was an angel. Fine. We like to go Jesus. Partially because he does say like one of the son of the gods. I mean, it's an interesting detail that he adds in there, where it's like, okay, he could have said like one of the gods, but he says like one of the son of the gods, which is, okay, there's something going on there. And so we can point to that and say, you know what, this is very similar to like when Caiaphas, talking about Jesus, says, you know what, it would be expedient for us to kill him so that all the rest of the people won't die. You know, Caiaphas said, I mean, he was speaking truth. He just didn't realize it. You know, he was like, yeah, it would be good to kill Jesus, wouldn't it? Yeah. But he didn't get it. So even Nebuchadnezzar is like, this is one like the son of the gods. He's like, you're so close, man. Like, you don't know how true you are. It's not just the son of one of the gods. It is the son of God. So he says the truth without knowing it.
But then doesn't he actually acknowledge that the three, where it says servants of the Most High?
Yes, so he does say, servants of the Most High God. This does not indicate faith, okay? Really, what he's forced to acknowledge here, by his own very own words, that their God is the Most High God. Like, okay, your God is clearly above all other gods. So he's not saying your God is the God. He's just saying, like, so here was Marduk over all, and Yahweh was down here. Now he's like, you know what? I was wrong. Yahweh is up here. And he's king over all these other gods.
Because
It's not faith,
basically
it's
of what-
logic.
It's logic. Yeah, this is the same, every knee shall bow, every tongue will confess.
But he's admitting that basically because of what he
Yeah, oh yeah,
saw.
yeah. He from what he demanded and what he said, and now what he sees, he's like, well, it could only be because he was, and that was the thing. His God was the top God, and he's like, your God can't do anything. Well, clearly he can. So yeah, it's not an admission of faith because he's like he's of the most holy, high God of all gods. Statement of fact. At the end, when Jesus returns, every knee will bow. It's just, some of us will be happy to be there. Some of us will be on our knees praising God. The others will be on their knees crying and weeping and gnashing teeth. So, yeah, the fact that he acknowledges that does not indicate faith. And we'll see that. All right, next slide. Oh, comment. He's acknowledging the truth of what they said about their God. Yes, absolutely. All right. Nebuchadnezzar. Oh, no, we can go back. Sorry. No, we're good. Okay, sorry. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted in him and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree. Any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins. For there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way." So he qualifies everything. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So, there's these nice little pairs going on here. First, Nebuchadnezzar says two things about God. He says he sent his angel. Now, right there, people say, see, angel. Angel just means messenger. Let's slow down. He sent his messenger. Could very well be the pre-incarnate Christ. Christ comes to bring his message. So God has sent his messenger, and he has saved his servants who trusted in him. Okay? Now he uses the same word for saved when he taunted them previously. Who is a God who will save you? And now he uses the same word, oh, you've been saved. So he's eating a whole bunch of crow right now. His words are stuffed in there, and he's like, well, okay. He acknowledges not only God's supremacy, but they have a loyalty that is higher than to him. So he acknowledges that, like, you know what? They have a loyalty to their God, and that God is bigger than I am. So he's acknowledging that there's a God that comes first, because they refused to bow to him and his gods, but they bowed to their God, and he saved. And here's the cool thing. So what else is, okay, so I love this. Who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him and set aside the king's command. Okay. Delivered his servants who trusted in him. What does that say? What do you see in there? There's something really cool going on. How were they saved?
Through their faith.
Through faith. Faith alone, right? Yeah, nestled right in there is he acknowledges, without probably understanding, their faith has saved them. Because they trusted, and that is the only thing. This whole, these are the people who would bring babies to sacrifice to Molech. These are the people who would, do horrible things, cultic prostitution. You do all sorts of crazy stuff to appease gods. Kill people, sacrifice people, do weird sexual things, whatever. Bring all sorts of goodies, and maybe your God will listen, right? He acknowledges, they trusted him, and he saved them. Really cool kind of thing, and I don't think it was processing, obviously not like how we understand it. We go for by grace you were saved, and this is, by faith alone, we're right there. He's confessing Lutheran stuff right here. He doesn't know it, but he is. But no promises, no offerings, no, please, Lord, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to give you that. Nope. They trusted, and their faith saved them.
Also, is his thinking changing because he said for there is no other God who is able to rescue in that way. So does that mean he's overriding his God?
Well, not exactly. Because notice he doesn't say there's no other God to save, but he says saves in that way. So he's still, he's not, in no way a believer of Yahweh. In fact, the only reason he's probably he liked Yahweh initially because he could do dreams. But now he sees, oh wow, this guy can save through fire. So in Nebuchadnezzar's mind, probably thinking well, that could be handy someday. Okay, when I catch on fire, I'll go to Yahweh first. then we'll call Nebu if that doesn't work, and then Marduk, and we'll see how it goes. So he's not there. He's their God can save in this way. So he qualifies it, and he's definitely okay, their God is on the top. But again, this pantheon is very fluid. Gods were in, and really, think about the Egyptians and their gods. The god of the Nile, the god of this, the god of that. For all he knows, Yahweh is the God of dream interpretation and fire suppression.
But if he ever got on fire and called on Yahweh, Yahweh would say,
Right.
I don't think so because
You don't
you
trust.
worship any other God but me.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's got the wrong idea.
Yeah.
So as far as he knows, Yahweh is over those two domains. So it's file that away. So that way, if I need to call on him for, whatever fire related, he's the guy. So yes, very cool thing that's nestled deep in there. And that right there is the beautiful part. I would say that's the focal point. Everything else is going on is pretty cool, but that right there is oh, that is gold right there. So the Judeans, the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they exhibit two examples of good works that flow from their faith. Okay, the first is where he says they set aside or changed the king's command. His command was to break this command. His command was worship me alone. All right. So not only so they by trusting in God, he changes and says, okay, well, previously I said break this command. Now I'm saying anybody who breaks this command, anyone who blasphemes their God, limb from limb and your house too. Which is okay, a little overkill. Maybe a little bit heavy on the law there.
He changed his punishment, didn't he?
Right. So he definitely changes there. They have their bodies. They have up. And yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own. So they yielded up their bodies, offered themselves as living sacrifices. Romans 12 verse 1. They offered themselves their bodies up. This was a good work, born of faith. So they trusted in God, and through that faith in God, they were willing to be you know what? Hey, do to me what you will. That was not a offering to God. They weren't saying okay, I'm giving my body to you so that you'll save me. It was the reverse. It was, God, you will save me, and thus my body is yours. That's where they're going with that. And then Nebuchadnezzar takes two actions. Ceases to require idolatrous worship and prohibits blaspheming Yahweh, and he promotes the three of them. So they get a promotion. So it closes out with where we're given the choice They kept this commandment, and God blessed them. He preserved them. So what we see here is this fun little thing where it's like, you know what? Sometimes you got to break a commandment. And this, I think did I talk about it today? Or I don't know, morning prayers are they're running together in my brain now.
I think you mentioned it on Sunday.
Was it Sunday? That sounds, I say a lot of stuff. Yeah, we did. Yeah, Sunday.
You said you were talking
The
with
light
some
came on.
youth.
Right, yes, it was after, well, that was after church, though.
Yeah, but you mentioned it in morning prayer on Tuesday.
Okay, well, I think I did it Sunday and, yeah,
Monday's morning prayer.
where, you know, oftentimes we'll have, very often, well, almost, I think, all the time, most of the time, you know, we don't have clear-cut choices. Like, we don't always, I mean, rarely is it like, well, here's two ways I can go. This is like, okay, this is the one that's like, I can either bake cookies for the homeless or I can kill my neighbor. It's like, which one should I do? It's like, if you're struggling with that, you need to give me a call. It's like, obviously you bake cookies for neighbor. So it's clearly, there's those choices. But then, you know, usually they're not clear cut like that. Usually we have choices like, well, I can do this, which will honor God and maybe not so great for my neighbor in this way. I could do this, which would honor God and maybe not so great for my neighbor this way. And honestly, this is where people have these crises where it's like, well, what does God want me to do? What is a God-pleasing thing? What should I do? What should I do? And this is where Luther, and we don't even have time to get into it, but this is sort of kind of in this discussion of when Luther talks about sinning boldly. It's not saying that Luther said we should be proud to sin and just do it, you know, full speed ahead. Basically, the gist of it comes down to, like, look, you are a sinner. Guess what you're going to do? Sin. Sinner's going to sin. You're going to wake up tomorrow morning. Guess what you're going to do in waking up? You're going to sin because you're a sinner. You know, I don't know how you wake up sinfully, but you're going to do it. We're all going to do it, right? Anyway, anything we do is tainted with sin. Imagine that we always have wet black paint on our hands. That's our sin. So we're collecting for the homeless. We're baking cookies for the hungry. We're helping somebody out cross the street, holding them up. We take our hands off. What's left on it? Black paint. Okay? We're trying our best to do good things, and yet we're still doing it sinfully because that's who we are. So the idea is, look, you're going to do it sinfully. We're not looking at, and Lutherans do not look at the world in terms of, I'm going to do the greater good. We look at the world and say, I'm going to do the least amount of evil. That's the German and the Lutherans. But I mean, it's true. It's like, because here it is. They were stuck in a bind. And here's the great thing. God will never put you in a position where you will have to choose, like, you know, to sin or break commandments. Like, oh yeah, he will. And it's not like a trick or anything. He's like, this is how it is. You're a sinner. And like these three were put in a situation where they had to choose. They could not keep this one and this one at the same time. It wasn't going to work. There was no way they could do it. Okay? They chose the lesser evil. To do this would be to obliterate this. And this would be them choosing pagan over one true God. So they said, well, we can't keep this. We're going to keep this. One true God. And basically in doing so, they look to God and say, forgive me. I am a sinner. Lord, have mercy. That's essentially what they said when, hey, if our God lets us live, he'll let us live. If we die, we die.
Boldly.
Yeah, boldly. We trust in God. I think it was a morning prayer where I said, so you have two paths, and you're going to sin either way. You're going to break one of these commandments. Figure out the one that is going to, well, definitely you want to uphold the first one, absolutely. But figure out the one that does the least amount of evil, so the best for your neighbor, that keeps you in faith, and then so do it. Do that one. And then two prayers. Lord, if this was the right decision, bless it. If it was the wrong decision, forgive me. And boldly do it. Because you have thought about it, you've prayed about it, and your intention is I want to serve God and I want to love my neighbor. And I think this is the best way to do both in a bad situation. So bless it or forgive me, either way. But I'm going for it. That's it. That's not to minimize thinking about things and counsel with people. If you have a choice and it's hard, seek counsel. Ask any of your brothers and sisters in Christ. Come to me. We'll talk. But at the end of the day, when you have to make that call, it's like, don't get lost in despair of like, oh no, I'm going to sin. It's like, oh, yeah, you are. Like, that's what you're hung up about? All right. Okay. Don't hang up about that. Christ handles sin. He forgives sin. All right? He's freed you from the worry of it. So that way you can make the best choice to serve God, serve your neighbor. Okay? What's going to be the most that you're going to get both of that accomplished? Do that. And then if you don't want to and you don't, well, again, ask for forgiveness. Repent. Easy. Piece of cake. Easy stuff. So, any questions, comments about Daniel chapter 3? This is a fun one. I like this one. Daniel gets fun. It's unfortunate that he's just kind of boiled down to a diet, the furnace, and the lions. Because there's a lot more going on. What's that?
He's a very interesting young man.
Oh, yeah. Well, and his buddies too, because I guess this one wasn't about Daniel, so. But, yeah,
So
good
far,
stuff.
it's one of the books that I find that's easier to understand.
Yeah, it's not complicated. Well, wait till we get to the dreams. Then it gets a little, who was I talking to? Must have been Christine. Yeah, we're a little bit over time. Well, hey, if you're getting bored, you can sign off. I think I was talking to Christine about how, we saw, okay. Should we go offline? It's fine. So we saw a billboard that was like, come to our church, and you'll encounter God, and you'll have a changed life, and you'll understand the Bible. And me being me, I'm like, here's what's wrong with this billboard. Because I'm so cynical, and I pick apart everything. This is my burden. I understand it about myself, so there's that. So I look at it, and I'm critical. So I say, like, okay. So first of all, encounter with God. Well, it's like, well, what does that mean? Well, yeah, I'm a Lutheran. I have to ask, well, what does that mean? What does this mean? Are you going to say I'm going to be dancing in the aisles, hooting and hollering, or am I going to receive the sacraments? So that doesn't say anything. I'm a buzzkill for my family. I get this. So what is this? It doesn't even say anything. Okay. The third one was actually, change life or better life. And I'm like, well, that's just a flat out lie. I'm like, please. Telling somebody that come to your church and you're going to have a better life for it.
It sounds like the vending machine.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is. Oh, it's even worse than that. I mean, it's false. It's like, okay, so come to church where you're going to be wrapped in faith and you're going to get a big old target from the devil. Because the devil's going to look at the atheist, he's going to look at you and be like, well, he's already mine. So it's like, yeah, your life is not, will it be better eternally? Absolutely. Are you going to get all your wildest dreams and desires now? No. It's not going to happen. So, poo-poo that one. And then the other one was understand the Bible. And I said, okay. Well, true, in a faith community, you have understanding. You read it together. We read it with a Lutheran understanding, Lutheran point of view, right? But behind that is kind of this idea of, well, you have to come to church to really understand because we need to unpack it for you. This is a very Roman Catholic kind of thing. See, in Roman Catholicism, the Pope is the only one who can really tell you what the Bible says. When you get down to their doctrine, it's the Pope who, kind of has that. So this idea that the Bible is some mystery, coded mystery that you really have to unlock. And I'm telling Christy, I'm like, look, yes, you read the Bible more and more. The more you immerse yourself in the Word, the more it will open, the Spirit will open up and you will see deeper things. But the Bible was not written to be obscured. Parts of it, parables, okay, but really even that is obscured except for the believer. But like the histories, the narrative, all this other stuff, It's written to say, like, this is what happened. This is what he said. You know, I am the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That's not a code you have to break down. It's not something you have to go somewhere special to understand. He says it. It's not, God didn't write the Bible to be confusing.
What was Christine's response?
What was her response? She was like, It was along those lines.
Sounds right.
Yeah. She's so my kid. She takes after me in so many ways. And so it's like, yeah, okay. I mean, she has great insights. So, I mean, she offered like, well, maybe they mean this. I'm like, yeah, that's probably what they mean. No, I don't really need to explain too much to that kid. She's smarter than she has any right to be. Scares me sometimes how smart she is. All the kids are. But credit to her teacher. Heather's watching at home. I have to make up for not getting her a muffin the other day. I got her 2 yesterday, by the way. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. Something about God being easy to understand. Anyway, all right, we're 13 minutes over. My apologies. Thank you all for bearing with me. Thank you all online, and we'll see you next week. All right, ending slide, buddy.